What's up, card fighters? BOTCG here, and here I am once again playing these decks so you don't have to, man. So I did end up biting the bullet and buying both decks, but currently these I'm calling the deck Dragonsmith. It's just the easiest way for me to call the archetype, because that's what it is, Dragonsmiths. But the Wroth Iron cards, the core of this deck, roughly you can get them for about around $60. I wouldn't recommend it unless you already had the rest of these key Dragon Empire cards that this deck does need to function. I would consider this deck like kind of like a mid-rangey, grind you out sort of strategy. You're just kind of not really trying to outvalue your opponent, but kind of like outgrind your opponent in the amount of value and how you're trying to pressure them from like the early, the mid to semi-late game. But yeah, there was a video out there, I believe his name is McMellan, which he just got to 1K subs, so shout out to him. But he affectionately called this deck, it was like perfectly mid or affectionately mid or something like that. So yeah, go ahead and check out that video if you wanted to do. But yeah, that really sums up what this deck is. So if you guys don't know, what the ride line does is the grade 1, when you ride the grade 1 on top of the 0, you check your top 5 for a Wroth Iron card, which includes your set order, and you just add it to your hand and then shuffle the rest. The grade 2, when you ride it on top of the 1, searches for the order and you add it to hand. And then the grade 3, when you ride on top of a ZEDHLANS, which the grade 2 is a ZEDHLANS, you Soul Blast 1 and search for the order card either from your deck or drop zone. And if you search your deck, you shuffle your deck. But what the order card does is, the only reason I'm briefly explaining is just because this is like, I would consider this deck a rogue deck. This is a rogue deck / unknown strategy, just because the cards aren't the easiest to pick up, and there's not that many people that are playing this right now, in my personal opinion. I haven't seen this at locals at all. Well, granted, I haven't been going to locals as consistently as I used to, but I haven't seen this at locals at all. What the set order does is, if you have Vanguard of ZEDHLANS, you could rest it. It has an act skill. These are set orders, by the way. Rest it, choose one of your units, it gets 5 kills your turn. If you chose a unit with Wroth Iron in its card name, until the end of your opponent's next turn, that unit gets intercept and plus 5k shield. So the way this deck works is, for maximum consistency, you have to max out on all your Wroth Iron cards. In your main deck, including the set order, you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You have 20 Wroth Iron cards, 19 to 20 Wroth Iron cards, roughly, in your main deck. So you just kind of have to run it for the consistency of your ride line and of what this deck's trying to do. So 3 copies of Persona Ride. This deck is slightly reliant on Persona Riding because of the on-place ability of your Vanguard to get your set order. You need 3 of these in order to restand your Vanguard. You'll get the triple drive no matter what. So something that's important of note is the way that his effect is worded. That if you've used the Wroth Iron, it says, specifically it says, when this unit attacks CB1, it gets drive +1 to the end of turn. If your unit was chosen by the ability of your Smitty in your order zone 3 or more times this turn, at the end of that battle, stand this unit, it gets 10k and drive -3. So the way that effect is worded, I was under the assumption you had to choose the same unit 3 times. That's not the case. It's a little wording jumble between what it means in Japanese and English. You just have to have used the Smitty 3 times on units on your board. I know it's very complicated, but the way that the deck is being played in Japan, and like me and my buddy literally looked up multiple videos, and in the presentation video, 3 different units were chosen, and they still restood the Vanguard with its secondary effect. So don't get twisted up in that. It certainly twisted me up, because I'm like, damn, like I'm over here trying to get the effects of all the rear guards, but I have to pick one rear guard. But yeah, maxing out on Persona Ride. You're maxing out on Glare Dragon. This is like your retire card. Of note, he has a ability that when he attacks a Vanguard, if he was chosen by the Smitty, he gets 5k on attack. And then it's Soul Blast 2, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. That effect isn't once per turn. Of note, if you do restand this. There is no way in the main deck to restand this outside of the over trigger, but if you do restand this, that ability isn't once per turn, of note. But yeah, I thought this card was initially very bad, and it is initially really bad in the early game. It can clog up your hand before you actually hit grade 3. So you might have to pitch like 1 or 2, but this is like one of the better cards in the deck just because it hits really good numbers by itself. 4 copies of Surge Dragon. Surge Dragon is really good in this deck. You can get its secondary effect off on turn 2, which when it attacks, if it was chosen by your Smitty, you could CB1 and draw a card. So this deck has like a lot of ways to gain advantage and draw cards. Like you draw a card off of your Surge Dragon. You get a card off of your ZEDHLANS every time you ride him. You get 2 cards off of your ride line. There's like a lot of ways where this deck can get like little microtransactions of advantage towards it really is trying to kind of like grind your opponent out. And that's the way the deck felt while I played it. And then the last of your Wrath Iron cards is 4 copies of Knight Habidild, or however you say that, I'm sorry. This is your countercharger / soul charge engine. The soul charge has rarely come up. More often than not, you don't need to use the soul charge part of it. I really wouldn't recommend it because it's a blind soul charge. But at the end of the battle, it boosted. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with ZEDHLANS in this card name, yeah, if you do not countercharge this turn, retire it and countercharge 1. So it's your countercharger. You can only use once per turn, but you have to play it because it's an engine piece. Now this is the core of the deck. This is gonna, if you already have your Dragon Empire cards, this is gonna cost you like $60. We're gonna go over to very good generic cards that really help this deck with its current play style of you're just trying to kind of outvalue your opponent, I would say. I'm not really sure how to explain this deck. It's not really defensive, even though it essentially turns this into a 5k shield, turns this into 10k shield, depending on how many times you choose it with your Smitty. But, oh, and of note, the Surge Dragon has an effect of if it was chosen by the Smitty, and you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with ZEDHLANS, it can't be chosen by your opponent's card effects. Of note. So this card has an untargetable effect. Because this is one of your better cards, and your opponent is going to try to remove it. So it does protect itself if you chose it by your Smitty. But going on to your non-engine cards, you're playing 1 copy of Bracing Angel Ladder. You have to play this because of Shiranui right now, unfortunately. It does have counter synergies because you do ideally want to play your Smitty like 3 times. So it does have counter synergies. There is times where it's like it is a neg in your hand because it's essentially a dead card, but you unfortunately have to play it in this format. If you don't have this card and you can't afford to buy it, I know it's like doubled in price currently. I wouldn't worry about it and consider this a one of. You can be whatever you want it to be. And then really great non-engine card for this deck is Califlant, this is another card that's really expensive, which is why I wouldn't recommend you picking up the Wrath Iron core unless you already have these Dragon Empire cards. But really good cycle card for this deck because you don't really use Soul outside of your grade 3, that one grade 3, and when you ride your ZEDHLANS. So just really good cycle card, and I've had the Retire of Column effect come up numerous times because this deck does want, again, like, it's kind of like a mid-rangey grind out strategy, at least from like the way my games went down. That's how it felt like when I was playing the deck. And then another really good generic card that's a little bit pricey right now, maybe not too much depending on what you consider expensive, is 4 copies of She-Roll. She works really good with this deck is because her ability procs if your opponent has, 1 or less rears, or if you played an order this turn. It doesn't say normal order. A very unfortunate part about this deck is you can't use the normal order past support cards because they specifically say normal order, and your Smitty is a set order. So that's very unfortunate, but this card is not the case. It has been future-proofed for ZEDHLANS, so ZEDHLANS can use this card. Really good 13k booster. Like this, plus Surge Dragon is what lets you play like a really good grade 2 game. or lets you put this behind your Vanguard, guarantee a damage on grade 1, depending if you went second or not. But just like a really good card. It feeds Soul, which it doesn't really come up that often. Like I said, Soul is not really a problem with this deck because you don't really use it all that often unless you're trying to get rid of key rear guards. But I don't really go super hard into trying to retire off of this guy. That's my personal choice of the deck. You can if you want to, but you just kind of play this like as a value deck. Then another really good, I don't think this is expensive right now actually. Another really good card that you can get this off twice without any trouble as long as you Persona Road once is 2 copies of the Red Cat. The Red Cat lets you draw a card, but more often than not, because you're already drawing or like going through so many cards with what this deck naturally wants to do, I've never really called this to rear guard. I've kind of just, because like I'm literally like trying to take my opponent to like the mid to late game, I'm more often than not holding these cards in hand as just big shield cards. So 2 copies of this because you can proc it twice. 1 of the Blitz Order PG, you have to play it right now unfortunately, and then 3 DPGs. Going on to triggers, now this is where I'm talking about where the grade 3, we are playing the red OT. Now I am borrowing like 80% of this deck from my friend, shout out to David. I'm borrowing 80% of these cards right now. Like only a few of these are mine because he doesn't own them because they're quite a bit expensive and he can pay for them, but he doesn't want to, which is understandable. He only has the red OT, he doesn't have the blue OT. You do have good synergy with your grade 2 and your grade 3 because their abilities on attack aren't once per turn. So the red OT does have synergies in that part of your engine, but it's an OT that I rarely like to use because you kind of already have to be set up in order for you to get the max value out of it, whereas the blue OT, in my personal opinion, is good in any situation. Moving on to the rest of the triggers, 3 effect fronts. Very simply, you already thin the deck out and draw so much that draws would deck you out. Like I've gone to like a very low deck count. Like even in games that I lose, my deck count goes very low to whereas I'm not trying to draw extra cards, and the shield is actually very helpful. For like the way this deck wants to play, the shield is very helpful. And then I'm running 2 of the Into Soul Crit. My buddy only has 2 right now. I do have 4 Into Soul Crits that I could just slot in. Again, like you do use Soul, and initially I was like, man, like there's a lot of Soul stuff in this deck. I'm gonna need this. It hasn't really come up. There probably are corner cases whereas you have a 21k column that you can turn into a 23k column or etc. But that's the only scenario where, you know, again, it's one of those cards where I'm just running it because I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. 4 vanilla crits and 4 vanilla heals. And that's basically the Dragonsmith deck / ZEDHLANS deck. I would call it a tier 3 strategy because it's trying to do something that is a little bit difficult in this format because everything is so fast and aggressive. Not saying that like you basically the way this deck wants to play is like it'll take a lot of damage early and save a lot of cards in hand, and then you use those damage resources to gain more cards, but sometimes that's just not enough to what your opponent is doing, the amount of pressure your opponent is doing for, like, let's say you're versus a Shiranui, for example, or a Youth, which I did test this deck against Youth. There was quite a few cases where I was pushed to 4 or 5, and I was just a little bit short of guarding their second push turn or even their third push turn because the game did make it that long. That's what this deck's goal is. It wants to persona out on your opponent at least 2 times in order to try and win the game. But anyways, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you thought about the deck down below. Again, I wouldn't recommend you picking up these cards unless you already had the Dragon Empire cards. And we're really close to 1k subs. We're like 30-ish subscribers away. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe again. Like, man, we're going to be doing that awesome playmat giveaway. If you don't know what playmat I'm talking about, check out our channel banner and make sure you hit that subscribe and notification bell on your way out. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, y'all have a great night. Later.